You've got 48 hours to sell your cabin or we'll take legal action. I read that line out loud, just to hear how ridiculous it sounded when it left my mouth. The paper shook in my hand, not because I was scared, but because, honestly, the whole thing was so absurd my pulse actually jumped. It was Saturday morning, 7 o'clock on the dot. My coffee was only half brewed, the kind of morning where you can hear the world waking up. And outside, through the thin kitchen window, I could hear Denise Benson's mower roaring to life, right on schedule. Every Saturday, 7 a.m. sharp. That's just who she is. A knock landed on my porch, 3 sharp raps, not the friendly kind. I called, it's open, and in stepped Harris Martinez. Cap pulled down, jacket damp from the lake air. Same steel-eyed look as always. Harris is an electrician, lives 2 cabins down. Not a man for wasted words. He took one look at my face, then the paper in my hand. Frowned, like he already knew he was walking into something dumb. What's going on? He said. I slid the letter across the table. Read it. He scanned the first lines. Let out a whistle. 48 hours, Colby. This isn't even close to legal. That's the point, I said. They're not playing by the rules. They're trying to scare me. He shook his head. This isn't a notice. It's intimidation on cheap paper. The mower outside got even louder. Almost like Denise knew we were talking about her. She loved control, loved the noise. The sound reminded everyone who actually ran things around here. I set my coffee down and reached up to the old shelf above the fridge. Pulled down a wooden box, flipped the lid. There it was, a folder I hadn't touched in years. I slid out the easement agreement, the one I kept locked up. Laid it flat, right next to the letter. You remember when they put the power lines through my property? I asked. Harris nodded. Yeah. I helped mark those survey stakes. Easement was only for residential use, right? I tapped the clause with my finger. Section 12, subsection B. Any for-profit activity means they have to reclassify the lines. Business rates? Triple. He leaned in, eyes narrowing. You think they're running something commercial through your lines? I didn't have to think. I know. Those EV chargers at the marina. I saw tourists swiping credit cards last night. He let out another low whistle. Well, that changes everything. It does, I said. They're making money off a corridor that was never zoned for business. And if they want to push me with fake threats, I'll push back, with actual law. Harris folded his arms. You want me to bring my meter? We can check the loads. Verify. Bring it, I said. Bring your camera too. We're going to document every inch. The mower cut off, just like that. Left the whole cabin in heavy silence. We both looked toward the window. Denise's red pickup was parked in her driveway. She crossed the yard, clipboard in hand. Same routine as every Saturday. Think she's behind this letter? Harris asked. I don't think, I said. I know. Who else benefits from driving me out? He set the letter down like it might stain his hands. You don't look rattled. I barked out a laugh. No, I'm awake. Wide awake. 2 decades in insurance taught me something most folks don't know. Paper wins. Shouting fades. Threats fade. But documents hold up. I'm not about to panic over a fake ultimatum. They want to fight? Fine. They just handed me the rule book. I put the easement back in the folder and snapped it shut. Let's go take a walk. If those chargers are running off my lines, this isn't just intimidation anymore. It's fraud. Harris grinned, adjusting his cap. Well, if they're running a business, it's about to get real expensive. We stepped outside, the air crisp off the lake. The path to the marina stretched under the pines, all quiet except for our boots in the gravel. Harris tapped the pocket where he'd tucked the letter. You sure you're ready for this? He asked. I glanced at my empty coffee cup, the quiet mower, the envelope that started my day. Ready? No. Willing? Absolutely. We started down that path, and I could feel the weight of what was coming, even then. Let me back up a second, though, because none of this would make sense without the people who actually live here, the ones who play their parts in this mess. Our community, from the outside, looks peaceful. Cabins tucked along the lake. Porches with rocking chairs. Wind chimes tinkling in the breeze. The kind of place people drive past and think must be nice. But if you live here a while, you start to understand. Peace is fragile, and control is the real currency. Denise Benson? She craves control. She didn't get elected HOA president because people liked her. She won because people got tired. Tired of meetings, arguments, details. Denise never gets tired of details. She collects them, makes lists, rules, amendments. She lives for the sound of her own authority. Cross her, and you'll find yourself fined, cited, or, in my case, served with a fake ultimatum. Then there's Trevor Holt, the treasurer. Used to be a decent man, I think. But years of balancing budgets under Denise's thumb just wore him down. Trevor's the sort who looks at his shoes when voices get loud. Signs whatever check is put in front of him. Some folks call him complicit. I call him cornered. 3 cabins down is Margaret Patterson. Widow mid-70s, quiet as snowfall until pushed. Oxygen tanks lined up like little soldiers in her living room. That machine hum is a constant, her only real friend. Denise doesn't show mercy for weakness, so naturally, Margaret's a target. I didn't know it yet, but soon, Margaret would be the reason the rest of us finally stood together. And Harris. Steady, sharp-eyed, not flashy. The man knows current better than conversation. People listen when he talks, because he never says what he can't prove. In a place where bluster is common, that matters. And me? Name's Colby Mercer. 20 years in insurance taught me paper trails don't lie. I've seen folks lose homes, families, everything, all because they didn't read the fine print. That's why I keep that easement locked up. Not because I thought I'd need it, but because life has a way of testing you, usually when you least expect it. The HOA thinks of me as stubborn, independent, hard to push around. They're not wrong. I didn't buy this cabin to be told how many inches my fence can be or how straight my lawn has to look. I bought it for mornings like this one. Lake still, air sharp, pine resin in the fog. Simple things. But quiet doesn't last long when power and money get involved. And that's where Denise overplayed her hand. She thought this was about a single cabin, one man she could push out in 48 hours. What she didn't know was that her scheme with those chargers, her threats, her greed, they weren't cracks in the system. They were dynamite stuffed right in the foundation. Halfway down the path, Harris slowed, crunching gravel under his boots. You think anyone else got a letter? I shrugged. If Denise sent one to me, she's testing the water. If folks stay quiet, she'll keep going. If they fight back, she doesn't expect that. He nodded. Maybe it's time she learned. We walked a while in silence, lake glinting through the trees. I thought about Trevor with his ledger, Margaret with her machines, Harris with his camera, Denise with her mower and clipboard. The pieces were all there. They just hadn't collided yet. But they would. When we reached the edge of the marina path, I stopped. Harris looked back, puzzled. But I wasn't looking at him. I was looking at the folder under my arm. The one that hadn't seen daylight in years. You ever wonder why I keep every scrap of paper they hand me? I asked. Harris shrugged. Because you don't trust anyone? Close. Because paper doesn't lie. We cut back to my cabin, cleared off the kitchen table, and laid out the easement agreement like a trump card. The pages smelled like dust and ink. Made me feel safer than I probably should. This, I said, tapping the header, is the Service Corridor Agreement. 20 years old, signed by the county, the utility company, and me. They run power under my property. I let them, but only for household use. Harris leaned in, reading for himself. Household only. No exceptions. I slid my finger to the line I'd practically memorized. Section 12, subsection B. Any for-profit activity conducted through the corridor lines requires immediate reclassification to commercial service and adjusted billing at applicable rates. Harris whistled, low and slow. Reclassification means higher bills. 3 times higher, I said. Sometimes 4. Commercial isn't cheap. Residential easements are a privilege. The moment you flip to business, the meter flips too. I let those words hang. For years, the HOA treated my property like a hallway, invisible and taken for granted. But in the fine print was the lever they couldn't afford me pulling. This is my shield, I told Harris. If they're taking money at those chargers, they're violating the agreement. Once it's proven, the state doesn't give warnings. They send a bill. Retroactive. He rubbed his chin. So if they've been running a public charging station, the HOA's stuck paying commercial rates. Not just stuck. They drown in it. Imagine tripling the electric bill for every common area. Marina, clubhouse, streetlights, anything tied to these lines. Harris chuckled, dry as dust. That would bankrupt them. Exactly. And Denise knows it. That's why she sent this letter. She wanted me gone before I noticed. I remembered all those insurance claims, clients crying, contractors yelling. Always came down to what was on paper. Not noise. Words. I set the letter beside the easement. The difference was laughable. One looked official. The other was official. One barked, the other bit. Harris tapped the fake notice. This isn't worth the ink. But that, he pointed at the easement, that's a hammer. I nodded. And I don't swing hammers lightly. The room went quiet, just the clock ticking. Outside, the mower had gone silent. Maybe Denise was satisfied with her morning theater. Maybe she was already planning her next move. Didn't matter. I had my move now. I stacked the papers, slid them back into the folder, and locked it up. Tomorrow we'd gather proof. Pictures, load readings, payment logs. Once we have it, we send it to the state utility office. Harris grinned. And when they see it, they reclassify? I nodded. And the HOA pays every penny they thought they were hiding. For the first time since that ultimatum showed up, I felt steady. Denise might have her mower, her clipboard, her cheap threats. But I had Section 12, subsection B. That was worth more than all the noise in the world. The path to the marina was slick from last night's rain, gravel crunching beneath our boots. The mist rolled off the lake, curling around the dock like smoke. Harris slung his meter bag over one shoulder, his old film camera swinging on the other. "You sure about this?" he asked. "Positive," I said. "We'll know the truth in 10 minutes." As we came around the bend, the chargers came into view, 3 of them, shiny and white, lined up at the edge of the lot like soldiers at parade rest. There was a blue sign in a cheery font. Public EV charging, credit cards accepted. I stopped cold. Public, I muttered. There's our smoking gun. Harris tugged his cap lower. Let's get it on record before anyone shows up. We moved quick. Photos of the sign, the kiosks, the card readers, every angle that made it clear this wasn't just for residents. Harris popped open the timer box on a pole, his fingers quick and careful. Digital dials, humming relays. "See this," he said, pointing at the settings. Switches to public mode at 11 p.m., back to private at 6. They're hiding it during the day. "It's automated," I said. "They know exactly what they're doing." He clipped his meter, leads to the main feed. Numbers flashed, a steady current way above what you'd see for a few boats or dock lights. "This is business load," Harris explained, not just to me, but for the camera. "Normal homes spike in the evening, then dip. This? It's constant. That's commercial use." I filmed it all, my hands steady even as my heart hammered in my chest. This was proof you could show to anyone, no argument. Just then, a man in a security jacket strolled over, hand resting near his radio. "Excuse me," he said, flat voice. "This is private property. You can't be here." Harris didn't even blink. Licensed electrician conducting a safety inspection. State code overrides property restrictions. The guard hesitated. He must have heard the conviction in Harris's voice, because he just shifted on his feet. Just be quick. We were. 20 minutes, in and out, photo after photo, meter readings, notes. Harris tapped through the kiosk's hidden menu, and up popped a list, transaction history. Line after line of credit card numbers, timestamps, dollar amounts. Weeks of business, clear as daylight. How many? I asked. Over 200, Harris said, eyes wide. All different cards. Tourists, commuters, people from out of town. This isn't a perk for residents. It's a business pure and simple. He hooked up his portable printer. Pages spat out, evidence stacking up right there at the water's edge. I noticed another sign by the entrance. Day passes available. Non-residents welcome. Big letters, bold, meant to catch the eye from the highway. They didn't just cross the line, Harris, I said. They paved a road right over it. By the time we packed up, the folder was bulging. Walking back, the hum of those chargers behind us sounded less like convenience and more like a cash register ringing on my stolen power. On the way home, Harris broke the silence. Denise is going to fight this. I nodded. Of course she will. But it doesn't matter. The moment the state sees this, it's out of her hands. He shot me a look. And if the board rallies behind her, I thought about Trevor with his ledger, Margaret with her machines, the others who whispered but never stood tall. Then we show them the cost. Paper doesn't argue. Bills don't negotiate. Once those charges hit, even Denise can't shout them away. Back at my cabin, the folder sat heavy on the table. Evidence, proof, leverage. Didn't take long for the phone to ring. Colby, came the voice, low, hesitant. Trevor Holt, the treasurer. I heard you got some kind of notice this morning. I let the silence hang. You mean the illegal one that says I have to sell my cabin in 48 hours? Trevor cleared his throat. Denise handles enforcement. I just manage the books. Enforcement. I asked. So intimidation is enforcement now? I wouldn't put it that way, he said, nervous. Sometimes we have to make strong moves to keep order. Order. I almost laughed. Trevor, tell me, did you know about the EV chargers running at the marina? There was a long pause. I could practically hear him sweating through the phone. Look, I don't really get into operations. That's facilities. Facilities. I snapped. Tourists are swiping cards at your so-called amenities. That's commerce. Commerce means reclassification, tripled rates, every penny of your budget up in smoke. His voice wavered. Colby, I don't know what you're talking about. But he did. Years in insurance train you to hear truth hiding behind denial. Listen, Trevor, I said, lowering my voice. I've got load readings, transaction logs, time-stamped photos. When the utility company sees those, reclassification isn't optional. And you personally signed off on the budget that hit it. He exhaled, the sound shaky. I just handled the books. Denise said it wasn't a big deal. Not a big deal? I gripped the receiver tighter. Insurance calls it misrepresentation. Utilities call it fraud. Courts call it liability. And guess who gets named when coverage is void? No answer. Just breathing, ragged and guilty. Your treasurer, Trevor. You know where the money goes. You know what those transactions mean. Don't pretend ignorance. Finally, he spoke. What do you want me to do? I want you to admit the truth, I said. That Denise is running this place like her own kingdom. That those letters are harassment. And that you've known the whole time. He hesitated. Too long. I can't, not yet. You don't know the pressure she puts on us. My anger flared. Pressure doesn't excuse fraud. When the inspectors come, you can either be the treasurer who covered it up or the one who came clean. Your choice. The silence stretched, then he hung up. I set the phone down, staring at the folder. Denise had her mower, her clipboard, her false authority. Trevor had his ledger and his fear. But neither stood a chance against what I held in black and white. Paper doesn't panic. Paper doesn't lie. That night, sleep wouldn't come. The fake sale notice glared at me from my desk, and Trevor's voice rattled in my head. Pressure, he'd said. Pressure from Denise. Pressure from what? The answer came the next morning. In an envelope Harris slid across my kitchen table. "Found this in the trash by the clubhouse," he said, his face grim. Inside were glossy presentation slides, the kind developers use to impress investors. The first page made my blood run cold. Maple Ridge Lakeside Redevelopment, Phase 1. I skimmed the bullet points, each one louder than any mower. Acquired distressed cabins within 12 months. Consolidate parcels for marina expansion. Convert clubhouse into resort amenities. At the bottom, projected profit margin, 240%. I looked up at Harris. "They're trying to force people out." He pointed at the timeline. 12 months. That's why the 48-hour letters. They need quick sales to stay on schedule. One slide showed the shoreline. Red X's dotted over certain cabins. Mine, Margaret's. Jim's 2 doors down. "These aren't violations," I whispered. "They're eviction strategies." Harris tapped a line at the bottom. HOA leadership to facilitate compliance through enforcement measures. Enforcement, I muttered. That's their word for harassment. It all clicked then. The fake notices. The threats. Even the chargers. The chargers weren't just revenue. They were leverage. Cash flow to grease the takeover. Denise wasn't running a neighborhood. She was running a scheme. "Colby," Harris said quietly, "this isn't about money anymore. It's about control. She wants to turn neighbors into obstacles, and obstacles get pushed out." I shoved the papers back in the envelope. My chest burned, not with fear, but something sharper. She'd picked the wrong obstacle. By noon, every document I'd collected was spread out on the table. The easement, the charger logs, the fake notice, the developer slides. It was all there, clear as day. That's when my phone buzzed. A new text from an unknown number. "Mr. Mercer, you don't understand the position you're in. Accept the notice. Take the payout and walk away. Fighting only makes it worse." No signature. No name. Didn't need one. I handed the phone to Harris. He shook his head. "She's desperate. And desperate people make mistakes." "She already has," I said. "She left a trail, and I intend to follow it." That evening, I walked the shoreline with my folder under my arm. Lights glowed in cabins. Families laughing, dogs barking, ordinary life. All of it fragile. All of it marked with red X's in Denise's plan. It wasn't just my fight anymore. It never was. When I reached Margaret's porch, she was in her rocking chair, blanket around her shoulders, oxygen machine humming. She saw the envelope in my hand and frowned. Bad news. I sat on the step. Worse than bad. They're not fixing violations. They're clearing space for developers. Her face went pale, then hard. "Over my dead body." "That's exactly what I'm afraid of," I said. Her machine hissed softly between us, steady and fragile, like the breath of the whole neighborhood. Denise thought she was building a resort. What she'd built was a battlefield. The morning after those developer papers surfaced, my porch filled with the sound of footsteps. First Harris, then Jim, the retired teacher, then a couple from farther down the road, and finally Margaret, moving slow with her oxygen machine, a neighbor steadying her arm. Nobody waited for me to ask why they'd come. Margaret held up a crumpled envelope, her hand shaking. "Colby," she said, her voice thin but steady. "I got one too. 48 hours to sell, because my fence is 6 inches too high." The paper trembled in her grip, not from weakness, but from anger. My chest tightened. "She threatened you?" "Threatened all of us." Jim pulled out his own letter. "Mine says my chimney violates code. Never been a problem before." Around the porch, more hands lifted envelopes. 4, 5, 6 in total. Same format, same legalese, same arrogance. Sell or face legal action. The sight chilled me. I wasn't alone in this fight. None of us were. Denise hadn't just targeted me. She'd set her sights on every neighbor who wouldn't toe the line. "Neighbors," I said, heavier than I meant to, "this isn't enforcement. It's harassment. And now we know why. I spread out the developer slides, careful so everyone could see. Faces leaned in, eyes narrowing, jaws tight. Margaret's hand hovered over the page marked with red X's. Her cabin circled in bold. She planned this, Margaret whispered. Planned to drive us out. Not just you, I said, all of us. Every cabin marked target belongs to someone who doesn't play by Denise's rules. She wants the land, not the people. The porch went quiet. But this time, fear wasn't the loudest feeling in the air. It was anger, shared, real, finally surfacing. Jim adjusted his glasses. Colby, I checked Michigan code last night. Service changes require 30 days notice. These 48-hour ultimatums are illegal on their face. Harris nodded. And I've got transaction logs proving the marina chargers are running as a business. Combined with your easement clause, that's a financial bomb under the HOA's feet. One of the younger men clenched his fists. So what do we do? Just wait until Denise bleeds us dry. No, I said firm. We document everything. Every threat, every false claim, every letter like these. Harris lifted his camera, old but reliable. We'll take pictures. Each of you holding your letter. Nobody can say you imagined it. Margaret straightened as best she could. And I'll speak to the neighbors who are still scared. Nobody should suffer alone. The air shifted. Fear turned to resolve. One by one, residents lifted their envelopes as Harris snapped photos. Honest, unflinching. Faces, papers, stances. When it was Margaret's turn, she held her letter high, hands trembling, eyes burning bright. They threatened my electricity, she said after the picture. Told me if I didn't sell, they'd cut my power. I need this machine to breathe. A ripple ran through the group, shock, then outrage. Jim nearly dropped his glasses. That's not just harassment. That's criminal endangerment. Cutting medical power is against every law we have. I squeezed Margaret's shoulder, and we'll make sure every authority hears about it. Harris thumbed through the camera roll. This is the record, proof no lawyer can dismiss. The porch buzzed with voices, plans, promises, determination. Folks who once kept their heads down now leaned in, their words heavier, realer. As the meeting broke, each neighbor walked away a little taller than they'd arrived. Margaret lingered, her oxygen hissing, her hands squeezing mine. Thank you, Colby, she whispered. Not just for me, for all of us. I watched her shuffle down the path, neighbors flanking her like a guard of honor. For the first time since this mess began, I didn't feel alone. Denise wanted fear. She'd accidentally sparked something better, unity. It was just after 2 a.m. when my phone buzzed. Motion detected. Utility corridor. I rubbed my eyes, heart pounding, and checked the camera feed, grainy but clear. A figure was crouched at the junction box behind my property. At first, I thought utility worker. But no crew comes without notice, and none at this hour. Then she stood, flashlight sweeping. I recognized the silhouette, the posture, the way she moved. Denise Benson, dark clothes, wire cutters in hand. My stomach dropped. She wasn't inspecting. She was sabotaging. I called Harris, adrenaline jolting me awake. Harris, get over here. Bring your camera. Denise is at the corridor, cutting into the lines. He was wide awake instantly. You're serious? Dead serious. She's out there right now. I pulled on my jacket and crept to the back window. Denise knelt, tugging wires, prying at metal with shaking hands. Sparks flickered in the dark. One bad move, and she could set the whole place ablaze. Harris arrived fast, camera bag swinging. He ducked beside me. Where? There. She's been at it for 10 minutes. He started shooting, frame after frame. Each click another nail in her coffin. Suddenly, sirens. Alarms split the night. Red strobes pulsed along the corridor. Denise jerked back, eyes wide. Her clumsy sabotage had tripped the safety grid. Dogs barked, windows popped open. Porch lights blinked on across the cabins. The whole neighborhood was awake. Harris, camera still rolling, whispered, "She just tripped a violation. Response teams are coming." I stepped onto the porch as utility trucks screeched in, lights blazing. 2 techs jumped out, all business. "Ma'am," one called, flashlights pinning her. "Step away from the equipment." Denise froze, guide cutters dangling. Harris and I hurried over as the techs checked the mess. Leads blackened, ground wires cut, voltage lines stripped. "This could have started a fire," the tech muttered. "Or killed someone. What were you thinking?" Denise's chin jutted out. "I was just checking connections. As HOA president, I have authority over utilities." The tech actually laughed. "Ma'am, HOA presidents don't control electrical infrastructure. What you did is felony sabotage." By then, more vehicles arrived, fire trucks, a sheriff's cruiser, even the utility supervisor. Neighbors gathered in pajamas, some with coffee, some filming on their phones. The night was a crime scene now. A deputy stepped up. "Mrs. Benson, you are under arrest for tampering with utility equipment, criminal mischief, and endangering public safety." He read her rights and cuffed her. The crowd murmured, a mix of shock and vindication. Denise glared at me through the flashing lights. "This is your fault, Colby. None of this would have happened if you just sold." The deputy cut her off. "Ma'am, threatening property owners while in custody won't help your case." A firefighter muttered, "Never seen someone try to black out a whole neighborhood over a grudge." The utility supervisor shook his head, scribbling on a clipboard. "This isn't careless. It's deliberate sabotage." I handed over my security footage. Harris handed over photos. The evidence was ironclad. By dawn, repair crews were already at work. The inspector gave me a copy of a report. "Mr. Mercer, this will be valuable if you pursue charges. What she did carries heavy penalties." I nodded, feeling the weight of the paper in my hand. Harris and I sat on my deck, the adrenaline still fizzing in my veins. "She's gone too far, Colby," Harris said, almost laughing. "She didn't just cross the line. She pole vaulted over it." I leaned back, watching the sun creep over the lake. My community had seen the truth with their own eyes. Denise Benson wasn't just a bully. She was a criminal. But her arrest didn't end the storm. It only changed its shape. Wednesday morning started quiet, but I knew better than to trust it. My phone rang before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee. Margaret's voice shaking. "Colby," she sent me another notice. "This time it's about my power." I was out the door in seconds, boots crunching the frosted path. Margaret sat at her kitchen table, hands clenched around a sheet of paper. She slid it across to me, her eyes scared but angry. "Final warning. Utility service termination. Medical exemptions do not apply to non-compliant properties." I looked at the oxygen tanks, the fridge for her meds, the blinking red alert. Everything in her life depended on those wires. If they cut her power, she'd be in real danger. She whispered, "Colby, if they cut my electricity, I could die." My jaw tightened. I crumpled the paper in my fist. "They won't, I swear." But inside, I was furious. This wasn't just harassment now. It was cruelty, targeting the most vulnerable. I called the sheriff right then and there. "This is Colby Mercer. I need to report a criminal threat against an elderly neighbor's medical equipment." Detective Morrison took the line. I read the notice out, voice cracking. His response was immediate. "Mr. Mercer, threatening medical devices constitutes criminal endangerment. We'll be issuing a warrant for additional charges." Margaret exhaled, relief and tears in her eyes. "They've gone too far." A knock at the door. Trevor, the treasurer. He looked terrible, suit wrinkled, ledger in hand, shame written all over him. "Mrs. Patterson," he said, "I owe you an apology." She stared at him, wary. "An apology?" He opened the ledger, showed us records. I knew Denise was overstepping, but I didn't know she was targeting people's health. She's been using HOA funds to pay for private investigators, security, all these notices, all intimidation, all paid for with your dues. Margaret gasped. So we've been funding our own harassment. He looked down. Yes. And I signed the checks, thinking it was legal defense. I was wrong. I asked, why admit it now? He gestured toward Margaret's machine. Because threatening someone's lifeline isn't management. It's attempted murder. I won't cover for her anymore. Before he could say more, Harris burst in. Colby, Denise posted bail. She's back at the marina, trying to dismantle the chargers with contractors. I cursed. Trevor straightened. For the first time, there was conviction in his voice. I'll stay with Margaret. Nobody touches her power. Harris and I hustled to the marina. There was Denise barking at 3 contractors. Cut the lines. Remove the units. I'll pay triple if you finish today. The men hesitated, tools in hand, eyes on the evidence tags still on the chargers. Finally one said, Ma'am, if this stuff's part of a case, we're not touching it. No paycheck's worth prison. They packed up and drove off, shaking their heads. Denise shouted after them, desperation bleeding through her voice. My phone buzzed, a text from Detective Morrison. Additional charges filed. Criminal endangerment. Witness intimidation. Evidence tampering. Warrant issued. Back at Margaret's, neighbors trickled in with casseroles, offers to help. Trevor sat beside her, flipping his ledger shut. She went after the widows, the elderly, anyone vulnerable. I'm resigning and turning everything over to the authorities. Margaret squeezed his hand weakly. For the first time, gratitude replaced the worry in her tired eyes. That evening, the whole cabin felt alive. Jim reading statutes at the table, Harris installing cameras by the porch, neighbors stacking wood, and checking on backup generators. Even the children came by, dropping off blankets and board games, their laughter slicing through the tension like sunlight through clouds. Margaret whispered, maybe we'll finally be safe. I nodded. The fight had shifted. Threatening someone's home was one thing. Threatening their life? That was a federal crime. And Denise had finally crossed a line no one could walk back from. Friday morning, fog rolled off the lake, quiet and thick. For a moment, it felt like peace had returned. Then the rumble of engines, official vehicles in a slow parade, headlights cutting through the mist. State utility inspectors, insurance investigators, federal disability rights officials, local law enforcement. A small army. At the lead, Allison Brooks from State Utility Compliance. Folder under her arm. Yellow sticky notes in her other hand. She looked right at me. Mr. Mercer, thank you for your reports. We rarely see this level of systematic abuse in one community. Neighbors watched, curtains twitching, clusters forming in yards. Jim clutched his binder. Margaret sat on her porch wrapped in a quilt, oxygen machine humming, neighbors standing guard. For 3 hours, the inspectors dismantled Denise's empire, opened the chargers, traced every wire, checked every meter, downloaded every payment log. Commercial usage, one muttered, scribbling. Retroactive to installation date. At the clubhouse, insurance agents pored over Trevor's ledger. Operating under residential coverage while running commerce is deliberate misrepresentation, one said. That voids the policy retroactive. Trevor just pointed out check after check Denise had made him sign, private investigators, intimidation, all paid with HOA funds. A federal official interviewed Margaret, examined the threat letter. Threatening a resident's life-sustaining devices is not just a state crime. It qualifies as a federal disability rights violation. By noon, evidence was stacked so high you could build a wall out of it. Photographs, logs, reports, insurance statements, witness testimony. It was over. Detective Morrison arrived last, warrant in hand. Colby were ready. Inside the clubhouse, Denise sat hunched at the table, her lawyer whispering frantically. Morrison read out the charges for all to hear: criminal harassment, insurance fraud, elder endangerment, evidence tampering, utility sabotage. Federal officials added charges for disability rights violations. As they cuffed her, the room filled not with cheers, but with a low, grateful murmur. Years of whispered fear evaporated, replaced by something sturdier, relief. Later, Allison handed me a reclassification notice. Effective immediately. Your property's corridor is commercial. The HOA pays triple rates, retroactive to the first day of operation. I scanned the numbers. $23,000. 3 weeks of greed had turned into a death sentence for the HOA. Sarah from insurance followed. Residential policy canceled. Board members personally liable for damages during the uninsured period. Trevor sagged. But this time, he wasn't afraid. He was determined to make things right. That night, the clubhouse was packed. Every neighbor was there, lining the walls, crowding the door. For the first time, the air wasn't heavy with fear, but anticipation. At the head table, Trevor looked out over the crowd. Our association can't function under lies, intimidation, or fraud. Tonight, the board will vote. Jim, retired teacher, spoke up. Before you vote, let the residents speak. Margaret rose, oxygen machine humming. Denise threatened my life, not just my property. If she stays, I won't. Steady applause, not raucous, but strong. Others followed, a father worried for his kids, a widow scared of late-night knocks. Harris, usually quiet, lifted his camera bag. I've documented every violation, but you can't photograph fear. Enough is enough. Trevor nodded. The motion is simple. Remove Denise Benson, bar her from service, turn over full records to authorities. The vote was unanimous. No hands for Denise. As the decision was recorded, neighbors exhaled. Some wept, some tore up the notices they'd received, shredding paper like old ghosts. Sarah from insurance stepped up. The investigation is complete. Policy canceled. Board members liable for damages. A gasp but no argument. Trevor absorbed the blow, then nodded. We'll cooperate. I'll resign after tonight. I should have stopped this sooner. Margaret raised her voice. Let tonight be the end. No resident should ever fear for their medical lifelines because of a neighbor's power grab. Long applause, louder, lighter, with real relief. When the meeting ended, people lingered under the lamplight, not scattering as before, but standing together, shaking hands, trading stories. The fear that hung over every porch was gone, replaced by something new, community. As I walked home, Harris clapped my shoulder. Colby, he said, I think we just buried the old HOA. I looked back at the clubhouse, lights glowing through the mist. No, I said. We didn't bury it. We reclaimed it. The morning after, the air felt new. I woke up without dread for the first time in weeks. The lake shone gold, neighbors waving from porches. A courier truck pulled up before noon. Thick envelope from the utility company. I already knew what it was. Reclassification, official immediate. HOA pays commercial rates retroactive. $23,000. My own cabin stayed residential. I took the new notice and pinned it on the community board beside Denise's first threat. 2 pieces of paper, one a bluff, one the hammer of law. Neighbors gathered, reading both. Chuckles, then laughter. She tried to sell you out, one said, and now she sold herself. Margaret stared at the notices, tears shining. We were supposed to lose everything. Instead, justice turned it all around. I nodded. Denise gave me 48 hours. Turns out that was just enough time to expose every violation she tried to hide. That afternoon, the insurance company called with the final word. Policy canceled permanently. Every board member who signed is personally liable. By evening, the news had spread. Contractors pulled bids. Vendors withdrew contracts. The bank flagged HOA accounts. What Denise built on intimidation now collapsed under her own lies. That night, neighbors gathered on my deck, Harris, Margaret, Jim, and even Trevor, no longer the treasurer, just another neighbor with a pot of coffee. We sat watching the sunset. You turned their threat into their downfall, Harris said, mug raised. They wanted you gone. Instead, you tripled their rent. The group laughed, the sound easy warm. I held up the original notice. They told me to sell in 48 hours. Instead, they sold themselves out in less than 3 weeks. That's justice with interest. Margaret squeezed my hand. Thank you for protecting us. Not just with papers, but with courage. My throat tightened. We all did this together. That's what broke their power. Not me, us. The night deepened, fireflies sparking on the water. For the first time in months, I let myself breathe. I thought of Denise, somewhere alone, her empire in ruins. Her threats nothing but scraps of paper. And I thought of my neighbors, once divided, now united. The HOA tried to turn our homes into bargaining chips. Instead, we turned their scheme into rubble. And all it took was reading the fine print.